Alright, so welcome back. Sorry it's been a few weeks since I posted my last video. It's been a crazy month. But let's recap on what we are working on. So we're building and learning React. We're building out apps and learning how the features work and all that. And so we've talked about so far installing Node and Create React app. We've created our first React app and we have it running in the terminal, and we used npm start to get it all set up. We also talked about VS Code, and we installed and set up VS Code and some extensions like Prettier for code formatting. We also talked about a few of the basic features. And in this video, what I want to do is talk about React elements. And then we'll also, that will prepare us for learning about JSX, which is really important. So React elements, that's what we're going to be talking about. Before we do that, let's just talk about the index.js file that was created. So you should have this this window from our previous install. If you don't, go to the folder where your Create React app installed all the files. ls will list all the files in the folder. Hello-world was what we created. Type npm start, hit enter, and that should run it. And if you don't have Chrome or Safari or whatever open, it should open a new window and load it. And it should be running on port 3000. Unless you have something else running, then it will ask you to verify that, and it'll try a different port. So let's now, in our terminal, if you hit Command N on a Mac, it'll create a new, let's do Command T. That'll create a new tab. And it should open it in the same folder we're in, and then hit code. And then period, that should open the folder that we're in VS Code. If that does not work, there's a shortcut install. Let's see, what is all this stuff? Don't show, okay. Available features. Okay. Depending on your extensions, you might have things pop up like that. If code and then period didn't work, open VS Code. You can do it by hitting Command spacebar and then type code and hit enter. That'll open it. And then if you want to install the code, the terminal extension, you can hit Command Shift P and then terminal. Let's see. Let me see if is it command line. Yeah, shell command install code command in path. If you hit that one and hit enter, it successfully installed. So when you, after that, if you close out, if you do code dot, it should work now. If not, leave a comment or something, and I can try to help you. Okay, so now it should be in the folder. So I'm going to expand this out. Let's see. Okay. So perfect. Here's our folder. So source and public. What I want to do is look at index.html. Actually, index.js. And I'm going to close that sidebar. Index.js, I want to look at what's actually going on in it real quick. So at the top, you're going to see all our imports. This is going to import React, so we can actually use React from our node modules folder, which it installed, and it has a React file there. Import React DOM, and this will let us access the web browser and put DOM elements and HTML elements on the web browser. This is CSS file. This is a component that's being imported from another file, and we'll talk about components a little bit. Service worker is something we're not going to talk about. It runs services in the background and helps, well, it tells you in this little note, it helps your app be able to work offline and load faster, and it does a bunch of stuff in the background. If you wanted to use that, you could switch this to register. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to delete all this at the bottom. And then we're going to delete all of this so that we just have React imported and then React DOM. And then see this little app right here, we're actually going to just delete that. And let's put a string right there. Right now we'll just say hello world. And let's save that. If all goes well, it should auto load and you'll see, voila, we've got it right here. And what's cool is we can actually inspect it in our web browser. If you're using Chrome, you can do like Shift Command C and click, and you'll see that it just has hello world inside of this div, which is already in our HTML. So awesome, it's working. So the top imports React and React DOM, and then the other thing that we need to talk about is this method right here, React DOM.render. React DOM, as I said already, allows us to access the web browser DOM. If you don't know what that is, you can look it up on MDN, Google DOM, or what's a DOM, and it stands for Document Object Model. This React DOM is basically like the conversion tool that lets you put JavaScript React code and converts it into code that your web browser can understand, which is going to be like HTML. It has a render function on it, which takes 3 parameters. The third one is optional, but its first one is going to be an element. So we're just sending a plain text element right now, and that's why it just sticks it inside of the div that we have. The second element is the container that we want this element to go inside of. So as you can see, document.getElementById root is what we have in our web browser right here. This div with a root ID is where our element is injected into, basically. And if you hit Command P, you can go to different files. I'm going to do index.html, which is also in your public folder, and you can access it that way as well. If you look in our HTML, it's actually really simple. If you take away all these comments, which is helpful stuff in there, so you can read those later. I'm just going to delete them so you can see how simple it is. The header has a couple settings. We've got a title, but then if you go to the body, if JavaScript isn't enabled, it tells you you need it enabled, and then all that is in your HTML is this div right here. That's it. Div with the root ID. So if we go back to our JavaScript code and index.js, the render method in React DOM is basically just saying, hey, stick this element, whatever I put in here, stick it inside of that div. This parameter is called the container, and basically it's our entry point into HTML. All of that React does is going to stick it all inside of that div right there. So if you have a website, you can run it all through there, or if you have a web app, you can just, all you need is that little div, and then React has control of your website. Okay, so that's what's going on when Create React App installs a default app, and now we want to look at elements. So what is an element? Well, an element is the smallest building block in React. Taking that from their docs, it's the smallest building block. Just like an HTML has elements, React has elements. Under the hood, the way React elements work is it's actually just a function that's returning an object. So I'll show you how that works. Let's create an h1 element. So I'm going to do const h1. This could also just be var, right, if you're familiar with that. But const is the more modern, safer syntax, so we can't change it later. React.createElement. And this createElement method has 3 parameters. It takes the component or the type, and for us it's going to be an h1. It's what type of element is this going to be? It's an h1. The second is props. We'll just do null for now. We don't need any. And then the third is your children. What's going to go inside? I'm an h1. If I save that, and then if I switch out this hello world for just the variable h1 and save it, voila, we have an h1. And if you go to your Chrome console and Shift Command C, click, you're gonna see that h1 is an actual h1. React DOM.render has converted our JavaScript object in React into real HTML. So another way we can check this, we can do console.log h1, and you'll see that what's output is this big object. Symbol has a symbol and props and key and type and all these different things. You can check it by going like this, type of, It'll tell you it's an object. All it is an object. React gives React DOM.render an object with all these H1 details in it. H1, I'm in H1 as a children, and it serves it up to the screen and it renders it. Okay, so that's what's going on the surface of JSX, which is what we'll look at probably in the next video. But it's just a function that returns an object. So when people say React is just JavaScript, this is what they're talking about. It's just JavaScript code. There's just a function and just objects, and that's it. Just like HTML has, all these different HTML elements like head and body and h1 and div and li and all that stuff, React has elements too. And this is how React creates them. And this is how we can make the building blocks of our websites and applications in React. Let's create one more element. So I'm just going to comment this out. We'll use the same syntax. We'll do const. Let's do a div. Div equals React.createElement div null, because we don't need that right now. And then div text here. Let's save that. And then we commented out the h1, so we're getting an error, so just replace that with div text here. And if we inspect that element, we've got a div inside of the root div. Because remember, React gives us control over this whole div and lets us do whatever we want inside of it. And now we've stuck another div inside. Okay? Great. Now I want to show you a few more things about create element and how it works. The first is you can create and more text. You can just add children and they'll all be put inside of your element. So however many children you add, even if you do like a new line, for example, the new line gets taken away. It doesn't do a new line. So it'll just take it and make it one space. You can just keep adding children inside, more text. See, I don't have a space there, so add a space, boom. Okay, so that's one thing you do. Or you could do the same exact thing as an array. The third parameter will take either an indeterminate number of children, or even just one child, or an array of indeterminate number of children. Okay, let's delete that. We don't need an array. We can have an array with one element as well, but we don't actually need that, so we'll just take the array out. So that's how the children argument area works. And then instead of null, we can add some props here. So this the prop section takes an object. So whatever objects we add will get added to our div. So if I do like ID 123 and hit save, if you look down at our div, it now has an ID attribute on the div element, and it says 123. The same thing could be like style. Style actually takes an object, so what we could do is we're going to now add another object, and we'll do color red. And it should color our div red. There we go. And because it's an object, we can comma separate our parameters. A little bit different than CSS. Instead of semicolons, we're using commas. And we could do like font size 30. Or 3 rem. Nope, doesn't work. Put it in quotes. There we go. So just so you know, if it's a number, it can be outside of quotes. But if it's some sort of text like red, or it's in JavaScript, so it's not going to understand what that means. So you've got to put it in quotes like that. All right. So that should, if you want to mess around with React.createElement, there's some tips with it. Now, one more thing about React.createElement is you can do a shortcut. So basically, you could just do const e equals React.createElement. And then instead of React.createElement, anytime you want to make an element, you can just do a little e, and now you've got your element. Boom. And in our consoles, if I do type of div, it'll be an object. If I just show the div, it'll show everything on it. Another thing that's cool, maybe I'll add this back in, is like if we do ID 123, when you go in the console, when you look under props, which is the area that we're editing, you'll see our ID. All right, so that's how React.create element works under the surface. And I know that some developers do actually use this React.create element syntax, and they just write JavaScript like this. I don't know many that do it, but they do. But we're going to look at something that's way easier than this, that many of us should be familiar with if we've used any HTML, and that's JSX. And we're going to do that in our next video. So I'm excited to get into JSX. If this is helpful, please like, subscribe, comment, and I hopefully will get you a new video soon. Thanks.